Here we are.
Here we are.
Another podcast
Yes.
where we are discovering and unlocking your brain's superpowers. Training your brain to work for you, not against you.
Yeah.
And today we are talking about remembering your why.
It's been such a good one. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say.
We've talked about motivation and we've talked about discipline and brain training tips and tricks and techniques that can augment those things. Today we're going to talk about, this is a specific brain training technique that's in the brain type test at braintype.me. This specifically is more for the improviser brain type, but it really applies to a lot of brain types.
Totally.
And it makes sense to a lot of people. So this is another freebie we're giving away today, talking about this one. The specific lesson, of course, is on the PDF of your brain type test, especially if you're an improviser. And it's a video, it's a YouTube, kind of like this. If people are lucky enough to be watching this as a video instead of just listening, they'll see us in our hats.
I know. I was just going to say that. I was like, and today we're wearing our hats. Yes, we've decided. I was wearing a hat because I have, a bad hair day. And PJ was just like, so you don't look dumb, I'll wear my hat too. I'm like, you know what? Thanks. And he was having bad hair day too, right?
It was. Look at this.
Oh.
If people could see, my gosh, I can't believe I showed
Just doesn't look any...
the 10 people that are watching this. But someday it'll be hundreds and then thousands and then millions. $1 million. Right?
I need a cat.
So a lot of people get distracted along their journey.
Yeah.
And we talked about the journey in one of the last ones and how that's a dopamine hit. And the successful people get addicted to the journey, not the finish line and the party and the celebration. But the problem with people nowadays, well, always, is we move our finish lines. We set this goal, we think that's going to make us happy.
Yeah.
And then we're on the way there to the goal. And the closer we get, the less happy we think we're going to be. And then we make it anticlimactic. And that's a dopamine problem.
Right.
And so today we're going to talk about how to prevent that.
Interesting. Okay, I'm ready.
So the solution for that. And it's a super common mistake. I have seen it. I've been a personal trainer for, oh gosh, what's the math? Since 1987.
Okay.
So, 30-something years. So there's two main types of motivation. There's away from motivation and there's towards motivation. Away from is when you're moving away from something. I've heard all the reasons in the world where people have results or where they want to, their goals. They might be moving away from something like, I don't want to turn out like my mom because their mom is just really ill and old and broken down, all that kind of stuff, and in a lot of pain. Or my back is just killing me. Or gained all this COVID weight and it's just making me feel awful about myself. I look horrible and, just blah, blah, blah. So they're moving away from pain. That's away from motivation. Then there's toward motivation, where you look to your future self and you see something that you want to attain. Okay? So anytime that we have a reason for a goal, that reason has been determined by away from and toward motivators. So the first step is just to write down both. Write down, what are you moving away from? Not that that's a bad thing. Away from is good and toward is good. They're all motivators. So you write down what you're moving away from. Be really honest with yourself. No one else has to see it. And then you write down what you're moving toward. The finish line. What does that look like? And how are you going to feel at that point? How is it going to affect you and others? And the away from is usually easier to think of than the toward. Because the away from is now. It's what you're experiencing now that you want to get out of. You want to lose the weight you have on now. Writing down the reasons why you want to get rid of the weight. What is that going to do for you? And then you ask the question again. When you think you have the answer, you ask it again. What is that going to do for you? Okay, what is that going to do for you? And you keep asking until you run out of answers, and then you know your real reason. And then, so that's easier to think of for most brain types. And then sit down and think about what you're toward. There must be a toward side to this. Sometimes people can't think of one because they're in so much pain. It's the only thing they can think of.
I just want to not have it anymore.
Yeah, but maybe you'll think of it later. And so write down that toward or towards, if it's plural, motivators. And it's important to keep note of that. And then what that's going to do for you. And then you ask it again and again and again until you run out of answers. And then you have your final answer, and you post your final answer somewhere you're going to see all the time.
Interesting.
It's a reminder for that. And then when you are going down that path and you come to the why in the road, there's double meaning for remembering your why, because everybody does, something that's going to distract you off your goal, then look at what you wrote down. That'll remind you. Another reason that it's harder to remember toward motivators is because oftentimes you have to think of your future self, and that's hard for people to do because you have to use your prefrontal cortex for that. We talk about the PFC a lot because that's the most important part of the brain for reaching your goals, no matter what your goals are. PFC's got to be there. And the PFC simulates scenarios and looks into the future. So again, the PFC is what separates us from the rest of the animals. Other animals have PFCs, but not nearly as active as developed as ours. They can't simulate the future, simulate scenarios, and they can't imagine themselves, their future self. Humans can. And so it's a good PFC workout when you're doing that too. But looking forward, and that's why it's harder to look forward, because especially if you're in pain, PFC can be offline, and PFC can be tired, or PFC can be underdeveloped. We see a lot of that with people that haven't been working out their PFC. And that's the part of your brain that helps with, executive decisions, forethought, making good decisions. And so it's just a good exercise to go through. But asking the questions over and over to get to your final answer, and then posting your final answer. You can post it somewhere, you'll see it often. Your bathroom mirror, the fridge, make it a wallpaper on your phone, or your screensaver on your computer. So you're reminded all the time of your why. And then if it changes, if your why changes, stop and ask why. Why did it change? It might be your subconscious trying to kick you off track.
Right.
Or maybe you've just changed. Something happened in your life and you've changed. So pick something better. So if it changes, then say, okay, maybe I'm going down a new path, but I'm going to try to stay on this path first, because looking back on why I developed this why, here's the reasons. Now, is it my inner toddler, the subconscious part of my brain, that's trying to sabotage me? Is that what's happening right now? Or did something legitimately happen? And if that's the case, is my new finish line, my new why, better? Is it better and bigger than what I have written down here? And is it similar reasons or completely different? And just start to analyze it. Because it's most likely your toddler trying to sabotage you, because you're making progress. And the toddler's getting uncomfortable because toddlers don't like change.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think when you're trying to figure out your why, is there a certain way to figure that out, like the specifics? Because I know with setting goals, right, you want them to be specific, but your why is kind of what motivates you, or what you're working towards, but that's kind of like a goal. Would you say that's similar, or would you say it's not?
It is similar to a goal. And your why is the reason for your goal. So you come in and say, I want to get a six-pack. Okay? Why? And then what's your away from motivator and what's your toward motivator to that?
So just for example reasons, my whole thing is I really want to get down to a certain body fat percentage, right? But then I don't know why. It's I do because I want it so bad, but I don't really know the why behind that. And so it's kind of figuring that out, because if you don't have a why
Mhm.
and you don't know what that is and why you're working towards something, it's like plugging going in the car and not having a destination.
Yeah, and that's why this technique is so important, because most people do exactly what you just described.
Yeah.
They have a goal, but they haven't thought about why they have that goal.
Yeah, like what's the reason?
And now, borderline positive, that goal will not be achieved.
Yeah, because the end is not in mind, you know?
Right. Unless they start down that path and something else happens to be a new motivator, because if there's no why there,
Right.
it's not enough.
Yeah, because what you're saying too is like the motivator towards motivator or away from motivator. That's what a why is it is a motivator. And so you can have a goal and you can become motivated by achieving some of your goals. Like once you start and you get results, you're like starting to feel, okay, like I'm motivated. But if you don't have a why on the days where you don't feel motivated, you won't do anything because you don't have a reason to go when you don't feel like it.
Exactly. And that's why posting it where you can see it often will help a ton.
I remind you, because your desire to get that has to be greater than the desire to not do it.
Right. And away motivation is usually what gets people started,
Yeah.
because they're moving away from some sort of pain. And then the toward motivation is what keeps them going.
Right.
I tell people it's all like gravity.
Mm-hmm.
The pain can get you started, pull away from the earth, and it takes a lot of energy to get you started in any direction. And that same thing with a rocket blast off. There's inertia to overcome. We talked about this in motivation discipline. And so a lot of pain will get the rocket moving away from the gravity. Then pretty soon it gets higher and higher and higher, away from gravity, away from gravity. And now you need another planet out there to keep pulling you forward, because when you run out of that pain fuel, you get further away from the pain, you run out of pain fuel, and now you're going to go back down to
Well,
earth.
it's complacency.
Yeah.
Once you get to that certain point of like reaching your goal, you have to now, like you said, another planet or like another goal or like another reason why you're moving towards something. And so it does lead to complacency though when you do get out of, like you said, that pain-free zone. Now you kind of have to change it up. So as you're working towards your goal, you have to kind of figure out, okay, what's the next goal? Or what's the reason why I'm going to, like when I get to that point, what's after that, right?
Gosh, I can't tell you how many people have started their journey because they're overweight, inflamed, and they're in pain.
Right.
Their joints hurt, and they know it's the weight, and they know it's the inflammation, so they go on the great anti-inflammatory diet, they work out, they do all the right things, and let's say they have 100 pounds to lose, okay? They lose 50, and they're feeling pretty darn good. And the pain is going away, and they're able to do stuff, and this is nice, and then they start to relax their habits.
Yeah, they relapse.
Because they're not as motivated with as much pain, and then they go backwards, and then they are back to where they started in just the amount of pain or more or worse, because they got sucked back down with the gravity because the fuel burned off because they weren't feeling the pain as much. And then they go through this yo-yo cycle, and that's often the reason for the weight loss yo-yo.
So you're saying to avoid that, right? You have to know what you're working towards and what you're going away from.
So when you start feeling better and you start to lose the pain motivation, the away from motivation starts to dwindle, you've got new gravity pulling you forward in the same direction. A lot of people will benefit from the windshield analogy and the rearview mirror analogy. If you're looking forward in your car, that's toward motivation. You're looking through the windshield. The rearview mirror is looking back, and the rearview mirror takes up, think about how big a rearview mirror is. Think about how big a windshield is.
Yeah.
So that amount of time needs to be dedicated to looking forward to your toward motivation once you have blasted off and you're running out of away from motivation. But what most people do is they spend most of the time looking in this tiny little rearview mirror, and then that'll suck you back too, because what you focus on, you get. So if you're looking through the windshield, looking forward and focusing on that, and using the mirror, rearview mirror, every once in a while for a quick reference to remind you of what you're going away from, but just a quick reference, so you can spend your time looking forward. That's the way to get there. Nobody reaches their ultimate goal completely if they're only operating on away from motivation.
Right. And these are super important to do. But I think the other thing, and we've talked about it in Discipline, our other podcast, is yes, look forward, but don't live there.
Yeah.
Don't live there, because then you start a comparison game with yourself of what you could be versus what you are now. And that will demotivate you.
Yeah.
And that will cause you to go back. And that is just as bad, right? Because a lot of people, like they say that anxiety and depression, anxiety is usually people that are living in the future. And then depression is usually people that are worried about the past and like living in the past. It's just one of those things where you have to realize that enjoying where you're at is very important. Just be excited about your journey and that you're on the road to that person that you want to be. So every day, if you only get 1% better every day, that is a huge leap in a year. So just making sure that you're focusing on the growth rather than focusing, okay, it's important to know why you're doing what you're doing, but don't focus on that all the time, because you want to focus on your growth getting to that point. So that will help you too, to not be nervous or irritated or frustrated about where you're at versus where you want to be.
Yeah, the celebration of getting a little bit better every day.
It's
And some days you go
huge.
backward, and that's okay.
Yeah, like applaud yourself. Like how would you, okay, so you should look at yourself like a friend, right? Like if you had a friend that was going to the gym and did it on days that they didn't want to, or was eating things, and if that friend messed up, how would you treat that friend? Would you go, oh, you suck, that's terrible, you're the worst, blah, blah, blah? No, you would never say that, or you wouldn't have any friends. So if you're doing that, probably you should stop. But you would say, oh my gosh, it's okay, you got this, no worries. Talk to yourself like a friend, because you are supposed to be your own best friend. And that's how you can move further towards your goals too, is if you just treat yourself with the kind of kindness that you would treat someone else, right?
Yeah. If you were coaching a friend through the journey,
Yeah.
what would you say? And when you're feeling discouraged about yourself, even if you have a bad day and you go backwards a little bit, that's human. What would you say to your best friend to encourage them? And then say it to yourself.
Makes you kind of feel warm and fuzzy inside. You know, you're like, oh, how would you treat a friend? You're like, you think about talking to yourself like, for example, I have had moments in the past where, you know, I was bullied or like different things like that when I was younger. And people go, well, what would you say to yourself now if you were like able to go back and talk to yourself? Makes me kind of like teary eyed a little bit thinking about it. But I would go back and I would give myself a hug, because it's like, everything's going to be okay. It's going to all work out. You're going to get better. Like, it doesn't matter what these people say about you. They're so young. Everyone's dumb anyways when they're younger. And it's all good and everything's going to be great. And just all those kinds of things, because you think about a young little person and they're so pure. Think about yourself that way, because you really haven't. You've just grown up. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
And so it's just treating yourself with respect and love and grace. So much grace is going to help you. Yeah, very much so. So, yeah.
Mercy is when you don't get what you deserve, and grace is when you get what you don't deserve. There's a difference. It's a big another step. I went to court for a traffic ticket one time, and
This is a funny story.
yeah,
You giggled.
So it came to be my turn. I'm sitting there in front of the judge, and everybody else had these excuses. And, well, the traffic light, you know, here's the timing of the red light and all this kind of stuff. And I think mine was speeding, and I didn't have an excuse. And so, but I just wanted to see what happened. You know, why not try? And so I just said, Your Honor, I did it. I wasn't paying attention. And I have no excuse, and I am just here to ask for grace. it's beyond mercy. I need grace. And he started laughing. and then he said, okay, I'll defer this, and if you don't get another ticket for such and such, then you can have it. And I didn't ask for a deferment. And this was back in the day when that wasn't as automatic as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
But then, so he took it off the record, and I didn't get another ticket, and so that went away. And
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It makes me think of all my ticket stories. I have a lot.
all my ticket stories.
I was naughty about, because you're from California. I'm from California, and S, like, stop stands for slightly tap on pedal, right?
Yeah.
So funny.
So takeaway
Yeah.
is ask yourself why
Mm-hmm.
to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
My away from motivation and my toward motivation. And if you don't have a toward motivation, you will later, or you can just come up with one. Well,
Mhm.
why? Yeah, let's think about the benefits of this. So you have both, and you
Right.
write them down. And you're asking why until you have the final answer, and then you write it down. So it's just a sentence or two. It's not anything big and elaborate. Post it where you're going to see it all the time. And then when you get distracted, ask yourself about that. Because it's probably your toddler trying to sabotage you.
Mm.
Maybe not, but if you really get down deep into it, you can find out. And then that's going to help keep you on track.
Right.
So the brain type test is braintype.me, and this will determine which of your 16 brain types you are. And then you will get a report that gives you a bunch of information, including your own custom brain training techniques that's going to make the most sense to your unique individual brain wiring, to rewire the brain, to make it better and make less willpower required to reach your goals, and faster and easier
Mm-hmm.
to reach health and fitness goals and other things. I mean, people have found a lot of other benefits outside of just health and fitness, even getting along with their spouse better if they both
Super
take it.
important. Or just
Yeah.
people in general.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Cool. That's all I have to say about buyout. Boom.
Boom.
And that's all I have to say about that.
What's your goal when you come in here every day?
I really want to help people
Mhm.
actually get towards their goals. Like,
Mhm.
it's something that's super important to me, and sometimes I can feel like I'm not doing enough.
Type down this affirmation or write it down and see if this resonates with you and if you need to modify it.
Okay, hold on.
I am excited to see who I'm going to help today become their better self, and to see if there's any new and innovative ideas I come up with that could help others too. And you say that emphatically
Emphatically.
because you're talking to your toddler. So
Yeah.
it's overacting,
Mm-hmm.
but your toddler doesn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
So just think Jim Carrey, overacting,
Yeah.
really enthusiastic. It might feel fake to your prefrontal cortex, but it won't to your subconscious.